$847,000. You see that number? It's 3 a.m. You're not sleeping anyway. You turned the phone's brightness down to the lowest setting so your spouse, who was sleeping next to you, wouldn't wake up. But the truth is, you're not afraid of waking him up. You're afraid of telling him. $847,000. 3 weeks ago, it was $2.1 million. You didn't lose it. You let it slip away. There's a big difference. Losing is a matter of a moment. Melting, on the other hand, is watching something diminish a little more each day. The word because means to accept, and you're not ready to accept that yet. You're 34 years old. Your name doesn't matter because this story is the story of thousands of people. But this time, it's your story. 6 months ago, everything was different. A net worth of $2.1 million. The software company he founded was launched 3 years ago and received $800,000 in cash. I thought you had deposited the money in installments. Tech stocks, a few growth companies, and some leveraged investments because you thought the opportunity is just around the corner. The market proved you were right. For 8 months, $800,000 rose to $1.4 million, then to $1.8 million, and finally to $2.1 million. You didn't tell your friends the exact amount, but you did drop some hints. You bought a new car, in cash. Your spouse started hinting at quitting their job. You talked about it just in case there was any substance to it, but now, the concept of financial anxiety is no longer in use. One night, you opened a spreadsheet. You made a 10-year projection. If the market continues at this pace, by the time he turned 40, he would have reached an 8-digit figure. It was on that very night that the most dangerous decision was made. Close the lever. The logic was simple. If it grew to as much as $800,000, it could grow even faster with more leverage. You opened a margin account. You borrowed funds. The size of your position doubled the net value. I'd heard of something called risk management, but you thought this is different because that's what everyone thinks before they know all the details. It was Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday. The Federal Reserve issued an expected statement. It sent a signal regarding interest rates that the market had not anticipated. At the opening that morning, the market fell by 3%. 3% is normally an insignificant figure, but a 3% average, when leveraged, amounts to 6% of capital. You didn't panic. It was the first day. This is just a correction, you told yourself. It's temporary. On Wednesday, the market fell another 1%. You didn't panic. The margin call came for the first time. The broker said, you need to deposit additional margin or we'll have to close some of your positions. Call in your initial margin. You deposited $80,000 from your emergency fund. This is a one-time thing, you said. On Thursday, the market fell another 1%. Don't panic anymore. I'll tell you about it quickly because that week went by fast for you, but every second of it felt like a lifetime. The second margin call came on Friday. This time, there was no cash available for the payment. Some of the broker's positions were automatically closed. At the worst possible time, at the lowest price. He watched the market all weekend. When the Asian stock markets opened, prices fell even further. The European markets opened and the panic continued. The US market opened, and by Monday, you no longer had any say in the matter. It was up to the broker to make the decision on your behalf. Positions were being automatically liquidated to maintain the margin level. You saw it. It went from 2.1 million to 1.6 million, then to 1.1 million, and then to 847,000. You didn't tell your spouse for 3 days. Do you know why you didn't tell them? Because what you said was true. Unless otherwise stated, I was hoping that the situation would work itself out as things went on. But on Thursday night, when her husband left his phone on the table, she saw the number on the screen. "What's this?" she asked. And for the first time, you spoke the truth out loud. "I almost lost everything." I know that $847,000 is a huge amount. Most people will never make that much money. But since you remember the 2.1 million, you feel like you've lost 847,000. Because wealth isn't an absolute number. It's a feeling relative to a point of reference. And your point of reference has changed. To make matters worse, the margin debt was still outstanding. His net worth was actually $620,000, not $847,000 after the debt was deducted. For 2 months, you were in a deep depression. It was hard to get out of bed. You didn't go to work because you didn't have your own company anymore. And he no longer had the energy to deal with the companies he was consulting for. He was standing next to his wife, but you could see the dreams in his eyes. As these dreams unfolded, they weighed much heavier than money. One night, your spouse asked you a simple question. "What are you now?" That question consisted of 3 words, but it carried the weight of a life-changing moment. Because up until that moment, you had only experienced loss. That question made you look at the things that mattered to you. Rule number 1. A loss is not an event. It's a piece of information. 2 weeks later, meet with your accountant for the first time. Look at the actual numbers, not the emotional ones, and keep going. $620,000 in net worth. 34 years old. His mortgage was paid off. It was still a significant amount, but it no longer gave him that rich feeling, because he had defined that feeling as $2.1 million, and he was the one who had created that misconception. When you ask yourself this question for the first time, honestly, why did I lose? The answer isn't easy. You chose to feel bad. The market wasn't wrong. The problem was leverage. The problem was greed. The problem was thinking, this time it's different. A notebook was opened. For the first time, he began making changes and documenting his decisions in writing on the rationale, risk, and exit strategy behind every investment. This was a limited constraint, but boredom had become a virtue for you. He started over with $620,000, but this time the rules were different. Rule number 1, never use leverage if you can't afford to lose it. Rule 2, position size cannot exceed 5% of net worth. Rule 3, before investing, write down and answer the question, what is the worst-case scenario? He went slowly, very slowly. Sometimes you longed for your old speed, but you remembered that it had nearly ruined you. In 6 months, it went from $620,000 to $680,000. It wasn't fast, but it was real. Because this time, it had been earned with his own money. It was the result of a calculated risk, not a gamble. Your spouse got involved in recurring financial decisions for the first time. You're now looking at the spreadsheet together. A year later, at the age of 38, he ran into a former coworker at a conference. "I heard you made a lot of money last year," he said, "in crypto and tech." You smiled. "I made some, and I lost some." Tell the whole story, because you realize that your old self would have wanted to tell a success story. Your current self prefers honesty. They looked at the screenshots saved at night in the old folder. There were 2.1 million of those screenshots, and you get a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly regret. It was more like the feeling of meeting an older version of yourself. That guy, you're still sending him messages, but you weren't that naive anymore. Rule number 2, wealth is built not through speed, but through periods of slowing down. 2 years have passed. You're 41 years old. Your net worth is $1.1 million. The numbers are still far from the previous peak, but you've never felt this secure before. Because this 1.1 million is real. No leverage, no debt. Grow your consulting services again, but with a different approach. It no longer seemed that he expected big profits from his client. Instead, he was teaching him the loss avoidance method. One day, a young entrepreneur came to see you. He was 28 years old and had made his first big money from the sale of his tech company. He was on the same show as your old self. "What should I do now?" he asked with that old look in his eyes. "Those are your old versions." He told her the story. The whole story, this time. From 2.1 million to 847,000, then to 620,000, and then back to square one. "Speed excites you," he told her, "but speed also destroys you. Slowness is boring, but slowness keeps you alive." Rule 3. True confidence comes from investing only what you can afford to lose. You're 44 years old now. Your net worth is $1.8 million. This time, you feel different. That false sense of security the old 2.1 million gave you is gone now. Instead, there is a deeper, quieter sense of confidence. Because this figure, now on record, cannot be reset overnight. Because no single position accounts for more than 5% of total wealth. Because there is a clear rationale behind his decision. You and your spouse are selling your old house and have moved into a smaller one, on purpose. "Why did you downsize?" someone asked. The answer was simple. Because our home is no longer there to prove our status, but to live in. It all came to an end 3 years ago, and you realize that the greatest wealth isn't the number you see in the bank. The peace of mind that comes from being able to fall asleep without waking up in a panic in the middle of the night. Now, as I tell this story, perhaps you too are somewhere along this journey. Maybe you're at the peak. Everything looks perfect and leverage seems tempting. Maybe you're at rock bottom, staring at a number on the screen that's getting smaller, and you were sleeping through the 3-to-1 odds. Maybe you're in the rebuilding phase. It's slow and tedious, but you're taking real steps forward. No matter what stage you're at, know this: the story of money never ends. It just keeps evolving. That night, when $847,000 was on the line, it felt like the end of the world. But that night was actually just the beginning. Because true wealth isn't about never losing anything. True wealth is about how you get back on your feet after a loss. Right now, someone, a 23-year-old, is funding their first investment account. They're excited, fearless, and inexperienced. Maybe there will be a connection for him too. Maybe a piece of it. But if it's his diary, if they listen, if they remember this story, maybe the events won't be so profound. Maybe he'll never increase his leverage. Maybe he'll stick to his initial margin. Maybe he'll prioritize strategies over speed. But he probably won't choose it, because everyone learns about their own subject through personal experience. Just like you. $847,000. That number doesn't scare you anymore, because it's no longer a chaotic worst-case scenario. It's not the end of the world. It's just the beginning of the next chapter.